The wolf has always been a subject of wonder and mystery, a villain of lore, and a fixture of fairy tales. Perhaps no animal has been more loathed and feared by humans. But today, fright has turned into fascination, and the wolf has become a symbol of wilderness idealism. An idealism that disregards valid reasons why wolves and people are incompatible. The wolf is a distinct apex predator, a large top-of-the-food chain carnivore that often pursues its prey by working together with other wolves in packs. Wolves cover large territories and multiply quickly. Wolves are very destructive to livestock, sometimes simply kill for sport, and are known to spread diseases such as brucellosis, anthrax, and the dreadful Hydata disease. The fact that there is no way to avoid serious problems when wolves are placed in close proximity to people has not stopped the federal government and the courts from using the Endangered Species Act to force wolves on states and communities that don't want them. Environmentalists are thrilled. Many of those forced to deal with the wolves on a day-to-day basis are not. I consider myself an environmentalist, not the kind that live in big cities, drive electric cars, and view mankind as a threat to the planet. I'm the kind of environmentalist that loves the outdoors and wants to enjoy nature as much as possible. I spent countless hours every year in the Yellowstone Park area, enjoying all it has to offer, including an amazing array of wildlife. I'm also fascinated with wolves, and I want to see them thrive in remote areas where they belong. But the fact is, some powerful predators in nature and in government can ruin people's lives. The federal government has become a predator with the Endangered Species Act, using the law as a means to override the rights of states and local communities to decide if they can sustain wolf populations. Artificially thrusting wolves back into areas they once roamed before human settlement has consequences. Federal government wolf programs have obligated state taxpayers with the high costs of wolf management and forced them to face declining tax revenues from industries related to hunting and agriculture. But the hardest hit by these predators are small business owners in the livestock industry who have had to deal with predation losses and the high costs of attempts to avoid conflict with wolves. When I heard about kid cages used to protect children from wolves at school bus stops in New Mexico, and how an Idaho rancher lost 176 sheep in one night to wolves, I set out to investigate the consequences of misguided government programs that put the interests of wild animals above those of real people. In New Mexico, local residents are living in fear of wolves. Just 5 miles outside the town of Reserve, I found cages next to the highway. Cages not for wildlife, but for children. Cages designed to protect kids from wolf attacks as they wait at school bus stops. For a single mother of 4, living here means being constantly on edge, terrified of a predator living in your front yard.
My name's Heather Hardy. These are all my kids. I'm a single mom, so it's kind of scary. They have to come down to the bus, and before we got this wolf cage, it's been really traumatic. We'd take the truck down just to bring them to the bus. I'm not living hundreds of miles from anybody. I'm living in a populated area, and there's just no reason whatsoever that we should have to deal with it. They've seen many wolves. We had a wolf chase our Great Dane in. Almost the Great Dane got in the house. We had to slam the door on the wolf. I mean, if I wanted to live like that, I'd move, to Alaska where there's nobody. But this is not fair. These wolves are taking over our lives, and I've been here 9 years now, and it's been hell the whole time. It really has.
Those who live in the heart of what has now become wolf country understand the perils that can bring to their livelihood. The Sidaway Sheep Company in northern Idaho has been in business for 130 years. Wolves are a sheep's worst enemy. On August 17, 2013, the Sidaways lost 176 sheep in a vicious wolf attack. I traveled to Idaho to visit the site of the massacre. It was gruesome. For the Sidaway family, the loss was devastating.
So, 176 sheep killed in one night by 2 wolves.
My son got a call from the sheep herder. We have 2 herders with every herd in the mountains. We have 9 herds. So they're in various locations. He got a call at 1 a.m. The herder said something was in the sheep. They couldn't see what it was, but something was in the sheep. So at daybreak, or when it was light enough to see, they could see, the massacre, just dead sheep everywhere, and they saw 2 wolves on the ridge. He sent me pictures, and I just cried. I just couldn't believe it. We lost ewes, we lost lambs, and it's just getting worse every year. To be hit that weekend in 3 different herds, it's devastating.
Over a 2-month period this year, the Sidaways lost 250 sheep, several dogs, and a horse to wolves. Every year the situation gets worse, and frustration builds as they try to cope with a government program that's indifferent to the human toll of environmental extremism.
The Endangered Species Act, I think, probably started with somebody had a good idea, but implementation and the use of other groups to use that as a tool to achieve another agenda has taken over. So what started out as probably a fairly good idea has been hijacked and, to my knowledge, not very successful and can just bring everything to a standstill. Whether it's sage grouse or grizzly bears or some beetles somewhere, it can be devastating to the private landowner.
I sat down with former Idaho Governor and now U.S. Senator Jim Risch to talk about how the Endangered Species Act is being misused by government agencies and why wolf introduction is a prime example of why the act needs to be reformed.
The wolf has taken on, for whatever reason, a religious significance with environmentalists. They use it as a tool to keep people out of the forest, to keep the kinds of things that we do with natural resources to a minimum because of the wolf. And a lot of people in America don't realize how burdened the western states are by the federal government. In Idaho, 2 out of every 3 acres is owned by the federal government. But when you have that, it is very difficult for free people to live and work and do the kinds of things that they want to do when you have a federal government that is intent on and focused on regulating every aspect of our life, and it becomes very difficult. One of the difficulties is over the years, Congress passed these laws that have with them, attached to them, the law of unintended consequences. When you take laws like the Endangered Species Act, which sounds so good when you talk about it, look, we're going to save endangered species. Well, who could be against that? And so long as there's a reasonable effort to do it, so be it. But one of the very first things that happened under the Endangered Species Act was they put 50,000 loggers and people attached to the lumber industry out of work because of the spotted owl. There's 1 pair of spotted owls per section of ground, and they closed down hundreds of thousands of acres from reasonable commercial timber harvest. And I mean, if people would have known that, and they would have had that in mind when the vote was actually taken on the floor of the United States Senate or House, I think it probably would have been a different vote. The worst possible nightmare for a rancher or farmer is finding some endangered species or some threatened species on land that they're trying to be a good steward of.
The Endangered Species Act has been transformed from a balanced conservation policy to an instrument used to pursue radical environmental agendas. Abuses of the act have led to thousands of job losses, hundreds of terminated projects, and countless invasions of private property rights. States' rights should not be infringed through the Act's broad applications of the Commerce Clause, and plants and animals that are not in danger of extinction shouldn't be granted rights that impede business, industry, and livelihoods. Wolves were artificially introduced to New Mexico and Arizona in 1998. Although Indian tribes have sovereign rights to manage their lands, that hasn't prevented them from having serious problems with these wolves. On the San Carlos tribal lands, wolves are an unwelcome intruder that is literally eating into the tribe's livelihood. Steve Titla is a member of the Apache Tribal Council, who sees the federal government's artificial wolf introduction as an intrusion on Indian sovereignty and an action that has created serious economic hardship for the tribe.
The United States came to us through the Fish and Wildlife Services in 1998 and said that they wanted to introduce Mexican gray wolves on the reservation. The Tribal Council voted 3 times and said that we do not want wolves on the reservation because they will impact upon our cattle industry. The U.S. government agreed not to release wolves on the San Carlos Apache Reservation, but they released wolves right off the reservation in the Eastern Blue Range on the White Mountain Apache Reservation. And the wolves, as you know, don't have boundaries. They don't know boundaries. So wolves came on the reservation, and the wolves depredated on our livestock. We have one place called B.S. Skep where we used to have brand about 300 cattle. And lately I heard there was only 3 calves that were branded at the same time. And people will say that, well, you have the drought, you have other predators, and you have other situations that cause that reduction in predation from predators. But before wolves, we were able to live with predators, and we didn't have that much drastic reduction in our calving numbers. But once the wolf was introduced, then we had the drastic reduction in calf mortality. Since the wolf problem is on the reservation, the U.S. government, the Fish and Wildlife Services, has almost totally ignored us. So in this case, the tribe is destitute. We don't have the funding necessary to address the wolf's problem. So we're in a catch-22 situation. While the wolves are running around out there, nobody's watching them. So in the meantime, the wolves are running on our reservation, and they're eating the cattle at will. And that hurts the economic system of the Apache tribe. Apaches, have been impacted, and they're scared of the wolves coming around because, they might get hurt by the wolves. At the same time, they don't want to shoot the wolves because they don't trust the government. They feel that the government might prosecute them and send them to prison.
Some Arizona ranchers initially accepted the idea of wolves and believed the government's claims that they would not be a problem. The ex-Diamond Ranch has been in Wink Krigler's family since 1893. Once a supporter of the wolf, she has now become an outspoken opponent.
Over the years, there's been a growing concern about the wolf reintroduction program, and the fact that when it all kind of began to surface here, local people went to these meetings and were very adamant about not having wolves. We felt at that time that we could not sustain, and we were told, oh, they'll bring millions of dollars to our economy, which didn't change the opinion of local people, because we felt like that we could not sustain, we could not be viable. In the beginning of the reintroduction program, a lot of ranchers kind of felt like, well, maybe if we just have a few, we'll be a little tolerant. And that was kind of the camp that I came from in the beginning. I thought, a few, I can probably live with a few. And then as the population began to grow, I began to think, well, I'll participate in this erroneous, misconceived idea of livestock-wolf conflict avoidance. So I got into that about 5 or 6 years ago, but inch by inch, day by day, year by year, there is no such thing as conflict avoidance. Wolves are wolves. By nature, wolves are wolves, and they're going to eat. And so for years, we've bred our livestock, sheep and cattle, to provide a healthy, quality protein product for the consumer. And they're gentle, and now we've interjected into the livestock populations, both sheep, cattle, and we've even had horse depredations here as well. A predator, a big predator, that has the capacity to come into a fearless herd that has no exposure to protecting themselves. We've bred the horns off of them, we've bred them to be gentle, and they're easy prey. They're very easy prey. They can slip right in. They're not afraid of of the wolves. They don't run, they can't run, they can't fight, they have no horns anymore. And so it's, to me, it's an element of really animal cruelty. It's just taking a gentle, innocent, unsuspecting herd of animals and sticking them out there in front of a predator, and they have no chance.
Raising livestock is more than just a way to make a living. A unique bond is developed with the animals and the land these people care for.
When I was moving my cattle to the mountain about 3 weeks ago, I was passing by some country out on a little country road there. I looked out and I saw this little black spot laying out there, and I could see little ears twitch. And I said to myself, no cows in sight, and it's right in the midst of the presence of 3 reported wolves. So I said to myself, that's a little calf. So I stopped, and the cowboy was with me, and we walked over to it, and it had gotten lost from its mom. It was so weak we had to carry it to the trailer. I said, we got to get this calf, we've got to rescue it, because there's been several wolf kills here just in the last few days, and this is just a prime piece of wolf bait. So we've never come across a mother for it, or anybody that really knows how it got there or where it came from. So anyway, I just brought her in here, and her name's Queenie, and I give her a bottle and hope to raise her up to be a big cow. Being in the ranching business is really all about, it's the bond that you have with the animals, the bond that you have with the land, and I guess the good that you can really do, that you have to do to stay in the business. And you know, when I think about this little thing, it just makes me feel good that I came along and I could save her life. With the presence of wolves, our animals do not have a good lifestyle, and nor do their producers, because every night you go to bed and you go to sleep wondering if you've got a wolf in your herd. So I think it's a great injustice. I don't support it anymore, and I do like wildlife, but I cannot support the presence of the wolf and the increased populations. They tell me, the wolf people that I work with say, well, we're in the business of growing wolves. I say, well, I'm in the business of feeding the people, and they don't go together.
Although government agencies and nonprofit groups like Defenders of Wildlife claim that livestock owners will not have to bear the cost of wolves killing their livestock, New Mexico rancher Corwin Halsey has had a very different experience. Wolves now threaten to put him out of business.
The wolves extended more and more out into my place. I had a problem one year, and after what I branded my calves, and when I went to ship them, there was 26 of my calves that I had branded that was missing and had been killed by the wolves. With that in mind, and the cattle I'd lost that year alone, I estimated my losses to be about $70,000 that year, just in that 1 year. When I'd lost all the cattle and I talked to the people at Fish and Wildlife about my losses, I asked them at that time if they could help resolve some of it, and I had sent them a bill because I'd spent $15,000 in hay feeding them on that small property. That's not counting any of my losses from the cattle. This is only counting what I fed in hay. I had $15,000, and I estimated just in fuel in my pickups and trailers, hauling the cattle back and forth, moving them from one place to the other, I had at least $1,000. So I had around $16,000 just in expenses. And they give me a small pittance of $1,600 to buy a little bit of hay and help out a little bit. And, you know, I couldn't believe they tried to help me, and then they sent me a 1099 that at the end of the year for that $1,600 that they sent me. It's just, It's just a thing. If I wanted to donate welfare or whatever you want to call it, if I seen a family in need and I wanted to go help somebody, I'd help them. I wouldn't expect that I'd have to send them a 1099 that they're supposed to repay me or pay taxes or something. I think that's plumb out of line. I know that they would like to sometimes compensate a little bit for the wolves being here or there, but in a ranching community and in a community that everybody lives, where there at one time, I suppose when there was wolves here, there wasn't houses all around, there wasn't children going to school, there wasn't things going on. So there is no place in our society for wolves amongst the cattle and the children in this country. In New Mexico, they built, the county and the schools have got together and built enclosures, so when the kids wait on the buses, they get in them enclosures to stay away from the wolves, because several times the wolves have followed kids down to the bus stop, and so they've got in them enclosures. And I don't feel like there's a place for wolves in our society unless there's somewhere where people can go look at them and they're not bothering people and they're not bothering livestock.
My name is Camden Hardy. I live right up the hill behind this wolf cage. I'm down here at my bus stop. My cattle guard is right there where the bus stops. We sit in this cage to protect ourselves from the wolves. As you see, it's kind of ironic having the kids in the cage and the wolves outside. We have gotten onto our bus right as it's pulling off, coming out of the little turnoff, and there's a wolf right across in the field just standing there staring at the bus. And every kid on the bus has seen it.
Crystal Diamond is a mother of two who lives near Winston, New Mexico, a town that welcomes visitors with warning signs about wolves. Crystal has experienced firsthand what it means to be a mother of young children living in wolf country.
I settle in for the night, put the girls in the bathtub, sit down at my front recliner. Was actually talking on the phone at the time, looked out the window, and at first glance could just see the reflections of the Christmas lights staring back at me. And after a while focused and could actually see two eyes within inches of my face and his breath of this wolf with his nose just pressed up against the window pane. And I was startled and stood back for a moment and looked at him, and he didn't go anywhere. In fact, he didn't go anywhere for the next 12 hours. He spent that night on that porch. I'm held hostage in a house with two dogs that are now inside and two children, and in the middle of a snowstorm with a wolf at the door. All night long. That next morning, I woke up to several vehicles, county commissioners, the sheriff was there, U.S. Fish and Wildlife was there, and the hunt for this wolf that was clearly displaying some very disturbing behavior was there. I had expected, because of the snowstorm, that there wouldn't be a track in sight, and boy was I wrong. I mean, there were just tracks covering that front porch, covering the yard, and in fact, it was obvious that she had bedded down underneath the swing set and like a little play area that the girls had in the backyard, which was actually a wolf-proofed play yard that we've built. The gates were left open. 3 weeks after that, I'm traveling to town on a fairly well-traveled, paved, busy by our standards road. Pull over to the side. My 3-year-old, who's prone to car sickness, needed to get out. So I left the driver's side door ajar, walked around the rear of the vehicle, and left her door ajar, and helped her on the side of the road for a few minutes. And there's a wolf at my open driver's side door with now my 3- and 2-year-old strapped inside. And I ran towards the wolf, putting myself in between the wolf and the driver's side door, slammed that door, and that wolf didn't go anywhere. It took me just a few seconds to power up my cell phone to take some photographs and then video. I have about 14 and a half minutes of video of this wolf who remained there, circling the car, both sides, as mothers in wolf country and raising our children among wolves. We had the additional responsibility and obligation of protecting our children from a threat that is imposed by our own government and funded by our own tax dollars.
Some wild animals are simply incompatible with civilization. The state of California has a grizzly bear prominently displayed on the state seal and flag. At one time, as many as 10,000 grizzlies roamed the state, but this predator has not been in California since 1922. There's just no way to mix such an aggressive predator with populated areas. And wolves are even more difficult as a predator to manage. Wolves multiply at rates much higher than that of other large predators like grizzly bears and mountain lions, as high as 34% per year, even when wolves are aggressively hunted. What started out as an effort to transplant 66 wolves in Yellowstone has resulted in thousands of wolves roaming Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. Thousands of wolves that are now feeding on livestock, elk, and deer. Yellowstone's experience with wolves reveals just how destructive they can be to animal populations. Despite the presence of predators such as bears and mountain lions, the northern Yellowstone elk herd numbered almost 20,000 before wolves were introduced in 1995. Today, that same herd has less than 4,000 elk. In the Lolo district of Idaho, another vibrant elk herd of 17,000 has been reduced to just 2,000. The presence of wolves naturally leads to a decrease in important wildlife populations. Moose, whose young are easy prey for the wolves, may soon be all but gone from the greater Yellowstone area. The loss is more than just diminished numbers of valuable species and reduced opportunities for hunters. It's an economic loss for hunting-related industry and a major revenue loss for state taxpayers. Wolves don't belong on the endangered species list and don't belong in areas where civilization has replaced wilderness, such as the lower 48 states. Wolves have never been in danger of extinction. There are tens of thousands of wolves in northern Canada, Russia, and Alaska. Preserving the environment from unnecessary destruction is of paramount importance. But in our search for a balance, we should never put the interests of wild animals above those of real people.
I own this property and I should not have to move because wolves have more rights than we do. I feel everybody has that same opinion that, we live here. This is human. We should have the rights, not these damn wolves. They need to get out of here.
We've tried. You speak to the public, you speak to anyone who will listen, and most of the time you just have those people who have never experienced it, and they just think you're just complaining just because you don't like the animal. It's not that you don't like the animal, you don't like how the animals behave.
The people understand, we want to save species and want to protect them, but not to the detriment of industry and farmers and way of life here in America.
Nobody came and asked us if we could live with a release here or a release there. All of a sudden somebody just comes by and tells you that there's going to be a release somewhere and you have no say in it. It's a violation of your private property rights. And the way I look at it is, if I went over to my neighbor and I stole his watermelons, I would be reprimanded. But if a wolf comes in and steals my private property, that's just the way life is, and I have no recourse.
I have learned that regardless of what you do, the federal people is in charge, and I don't know if we have any recourse. I sometimes feel totally helpless and hopeless as to what's going to happen with this situation, because it seems to just get worse and worse and worse. And so at some point, I think if it keeps going on, everybody, especially me, I have no choice. If I can't make a living at it, I'll have to sell out and just go do something else. Thank you very much.
When federal government agencies become predators, they begin to look much like wolves. Both are apex predators with no predators of their own. They have little respect for boundaries. They prey on the weak. They often work together in packs. They use deceptive tactics. And they have complete disregard for those who suffer from their actions. Can wolves be controlled? Perhaps a better question is whether or not the federal government and the Endangered Species Act can be controlled. In the end, it's up to the American people to realize that these predators will control us unless we control them.
Yeah.